Hello, everyone. I am Christine.
I'm Hallie.
And I'm David.
And we are self-led besties. And you can be a bestie too. So come join us as we talk about the experiences of our parts and try out self-led experiments.
Self-led besties, talking about our parts. Self-led besties, speaking from our hearts.
Welcome back. We are so happy you're back with us, besties. Whether this is your first time with us or you watched our first episode, we're so happy you're here. And I just wanted to remind you that if you are listening to this, you can also watch on the Ordinary Sacred YouTube channel and you can see all of our facial expressions. Or if you are watching this on YouTube, you can also listen if you ever just want to listen on your favorite podcasting platform. All right. So do we want to just check and see what's alive in us real quick before we start? All right. So I invite you to go inside. Make that wild U-turn. And just take a moment to see who's here with you right now. And let them all know that they are welcome. There's no right or wrong. And then whenever you're ready, you can come back out
Into outer space.
That's right.
David, would you like to go first?
Sure. What did I notice? I noticed I noticed I have a silly part or like a giddy part. I think it's just excited to be hanging out with you two. And before we started recording this, it was like, I don't want to do a parse check-in. But like a teenager. It's funny as well, just halfway through the parts check-in, that part opened my eyes. And so used to all serene and self energy. It was just like, oh, let's go back inside. So yeah, just appreciating that one. It's just looking to have fun. Notice maybe, yeah, like a little bit of watchful energy, suppressive energy. Not maybe as those parts, which are probably stronger in the first episode, feel a lot sort of more relaxed and yeah. Yeah, that's really pretty blended, or was pretty blended with the silly part, but it's starting to settle down a little bit.
That one's welcome.
I'm like, come back, silly part.
I think there's a serious part coming in now. It's like, you go back, sit in your seat, young man.
Oh, they're all welcome.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks for listening.
Christine?
I noticed, it's so fascinating. Like kind of in my nervous system has like just really active energy. So the image that came to me was like kids jumping on the bed. Like, ah! And I was asking them if they are excited or nervous. And they were like, yes. And so they were showing me all these, different transitions and things coming up in the next few weeks that they're excited/nervous about, that both and they're just excited about being with the two of you. So they're happy to hear about the silly part. Yeah, they're kind of like, yeah, let's play.
I also opened my eyes when we first started and saw Christine smiling. And I was like, ooh, what parts are alive in there for her? Aw. Are they skited?
Yes, it's kind of like that. Because yeah, it wasn't even necessarily like some are nervous and some are excited. They were just like, yes, we're just have a lot of energy, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and I do know that sometimes when so I have another part that's like, "Okay, but we can't let them get out of control because if they get too excited, then we crash," after kind of thing. And so I'm just letting that part know, like, yeah, I'm bigger than them and I can be with them and let them feel as they do. And if they do have too much concern, I can listen to them so they don't have to be too big to get my attention.
Mm.
Yeah.
I noticed some curiosity, only if you want to share about what that crash looks like or feels like in your system.
Yeah. Well, so in the past, when my system gets really, really heightened, excited, and again, I feel it in my nervous system, just like a wired kind of thing. And again, they were showing me that they were jumping up and down, and they had all of this anticipation and yeah, scared and excited at the same time. Um, when I've had that in the past, if it goes on too long, then my system will shut down and crash, and I'll feel like I can't usually I can't move, like I'm just in bed, completely shut down. And my parts have explained that it really is this polarization, and so that's why I had this part come in and say, "Ooh, don't let them get too out of hand because then, like, equal and opposite will happen." And so I'm just letting that part know that they make sense because that has absolutely happened in the past, but that trying to get those parts to stop and just not be in that state hasn't usually worked to get them to relax. What does work is to listen to them. Because then once they feel really heard about what they're excited about, what they're worried about, then they naturally relax.
No, I'm noticing a lot of resonance with in my system, the serious part, when your part was saying about the concern about the come down, that one was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, yeah, yeah, that does happen." And then I noticed, like, a big wave of tiredness go up my body at the point when you said about, the shutdown. So interesting. There's that mirroring in our systems in that moment. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, I also did have curiosity if your skited parts feel you got to give them enough witness to see and hear them right now, or if they needed more time.
Um, yeah, they are appreciative of that. I'm just checking in with them. I've also kind of promised them that I will spend more time with them later, and usually they appreciate that. They appreciate just knowing that I have a specific time when I'm going to listen more to them. So they're relaxing a little bit more from that too. But thank you for asking.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you,
Hallie!
Hallie. Yeah, what did you notice?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. The first thing I noticed was my feet are freezing. And a part was saying, "Oh, maybe after this parts check-in, we pause so I can get a heating pad for my feet," which I appreciate that idea. Some also, I think, skited energy from some of my parts around, "It's so fun to be with you all," and once we actually kind of get into it and start going, it feels even better. And then also that same part from last time around, am I gonna be blocked and not have anything to say? Um, yeah, just welcoming them all. And also a little bit of energy around, will it be interesting? Will what we say here be interesting for people, for listeners? Yeah. Um, yeah, we don't know. I don't know.
We can't control anybody else.
Nope. Yeah, so I think that's what I'm noticing the most right now.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
those parts, this last time, like the ones with the concerns, did they feel less intense, less worried than last time, or is it maybe the same amount?
Yeah, sort of like your parts.
Mhm.
They feel more relaxed given that they've actually had
Mm.
some experience now and noticed that at least some people responded or engaged with the podcast and enjoyed it, and they've had a little
Mm.
experimenting. So, yeah, there's a definitely it's not the first time
Mm.
feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for
Mm.
noticing that with me.
Mm. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and maybe this is a part that is having a response, so you can tell me how it lands with you. But there's a part of me saying, teachers or people on YouTube or podcasts, like the people that I like to listen to the most are the people who are the most interested in what they're saying. So they can even talk about a topic that I'm not really interested in, but they're interested in it. So this part is saying, as long as we're interested in what we're saying, like maybe other people who resonate will be interested.
That makes so much sense and also puts my parts at ease because there's this knowing that we will be interested in what we're saying. So there's that, and that
There is
feels
assurance there.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I have another part reminding me of, I think it was this book called Not Nice, and it was where the author was telling someone, you know that if you go into a room of 100 people, 30 of them will not like you, or something like that. And she was like, really? And he goes, no, I just totally made that up. But it's he said, but I just wanted to explain to you that not everybody is gonna like you.
Mm.
And I thought it was funny because I do have parts that are just so devastated if anybody expresses like that they don't like me, but it's just not realistic. That's just the way it is. Not everybody, appreciates everybody, but the people who do, do.
Yeah. I love that. So I noticed sort of maybe something that's shifted in the last couple of years that there was almost a part that just said, I really don't mind when someone doesn't like me, which is kind of foreign to my system from the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And it's not all of my parts, but yeah, there's
Hmm.
freedom there, right? They're
Mm.
just
Let
that's
them.
okay. Yeah, let them and there's nothing wrong with them for not liking me
Right.
or parts liking parts of me, right? Or parts of them not liking parts of me. Probably what's
Yeah.
happening.
That's a good segue into my activation station.
Yay!
Coming up next.
Activation station.
So we were just talking about trying to describe what the activation station segments that we will sometimes do are. And Christine, you were talking about what Brian said.
Yeah, so when I first told Brian that we were going to name the podcast The Self-Led Besties, he said, "Ooh, that's a lot of pressure. People are going to expect you to be in self all the time and perfect, or those expectations." And I was telling him about the different segments that we wanted to have. The nuance party where we bring posts and talk about what we agree and disagree with, or bring the different nuance to it. And then also the activation station where we bring something that has activated our parts and maybe even allow our parts to blend with us intentionally and express themselves and listen from our own self and then each other's self. Um, and that may feel intimidating to people because a lot of people, I think, misunderstand that self-leadership means that our parts don't ever come out. But that's totally unsustainable and totally unhuman. But it's really about an embracing of noticing when we have parts that get really angry and defensive and self-protective, or want to lash out or feel misunderstood or shut down, or feel really sad or hurt or, all of those things. It's noticing them and really allowing them to express themselves. So I think the activation station is where we kind of let those parts, we might be speaking for them, or we might sometimes allow ourselves to blend with them and then step back from self and listen to them.
Yeah, and parts as well, they can, at least in my experience, they just blend in and out. They're so fluid, and sometimes you don't really know the parts blended, and you might just realize after. And if you realize after, that's okay. That's part awareness. That's like part of self leadership. I suppose there's like maybe a freedom to let parts blend with the knowledge or trust that there's an intention within our systems and within ourselves to sort of listen and see these parts. And mm, at least in my system, whenever there's a rule or there's like an expectation, like only speak for your parts, or try to be self-led, it doesn't seem to work. Like Christina said, it's not human. It's not how things are in day-to-day, moment-to-moment life. Um, so there's just sort of an allowance there and like a freedom and a trust that, yeah, will we as a collective and individually will sort of be able to hold our parts, listen to them. They can blend if they want, then we can speak for them
Mhm.
if they want. Mm, trust that it'll be
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's lots of times this week where I noticed that my parts were really active. And while I couldn't find enough self energy to interact with the person in front of me, the self-led decision, Helen and I talked a little bit about this, was just to say nothing until I could access self. And I love what Marshall Rosenberg says. I say this all the time. If you can't find a compassionate, curious stance toward another person, it's because you must make a YOU turn and turn it toward yourself and your own parts first.
Mhm.
And that's been such a life-giving thing, because it's not like you're a bad person if your parts come up or they're activated. It's just, okay, can I turn toward them and listen to them? And until I have enough calm and clarity and compassion and curiosity toward the other person that I can interact with them. So my system has learned that if and when I do blend with my parts and lash out at another person, it doesn't usually go well. Though that can still happen, right? But usually, yeah, like you said, David, I'll notice afterward and go, oh, wow, I was really blended with parts there. And then I can speak for that and try to repair. But and now a lot of times what I'll do is I'll notice that they're really active, and I'm not trying to suppress them. I'm just saying I'm not going to blend with you toward the other person. I'm going to wait to talk to the other person until I have access to some self energy.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like David said, it's even just that part's awareness, even if you can't get much farther than the part's awareness. It's almost like the bridge to self energy. It's like the bridge to self leadership is even just being aware that you have parts that are
Mm.
active,
Mhm.
Yes.
Mm.
at least at some point.
Yes.
A year later.
Yeah. Sometimes it is. Yeah. You look back on your life and you go, oh,
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
what was
Yeah, so
there.
true.
Yeah.
Uh,
And a reminder that the parts are not bad
mhm.
and
Right.
they're
Right.
trying to keep us safe. They have a lot of wisdom,
Mm.
Mhm.
even if even if they can create some chaos sometimes.
Yeah. And it really is like if all of us accepted when our parts got activated and turned toward them and really listened to them and were our own primary caregiver in that way, I do think, things would go better. And sometimes the self-led thing is to create distance, which my example will kind of show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so does it feel safe, Christine, to maybe share about your recent activation, what came up for you?
Yeah. So this was this morning, and I have listened to the parts. It was a big reaction in my system, and then kind of a cascade of realizations. And so maybe I'll uh, speak a little for those too. So normally when I wake up in the morning, I have this ritual where I'll think of 3 things I'm thankful for because I want to start the day in a, you know, grateful headspace. Actually, before that, usually if I've had big dreams and big parts that come up, I'll just listen to them and see what they want me to know. And then I'll think of some things I'm thankful for. And then, though, I might grab my phone. So
Is
there's a
there
part that's like, let them know that you don't just grab your phone first.
Yeah, I was gonna
But
say, is there a part with judgment around that? Or concern?
yeah. But normally it's not too bad. I'm just checking to see if there's any urgent things on there. But I had a message that I got on Instagram, and I think I'm going to share everything with you all. I don't know if we'll end up editing some of it out because I was thinking if this person, I doubt it, but if they were to listen to this, like if someone were to rehash what I had written in a private message to someone, I think I would have parts that would feel really icky about that. And maybe there's a part coming in that's like, I just want to be clear that my intention is not to attack this person. It really is about what I learned about myself through this interaction. But I was blended with parts this morning that were unhappy. Okay, so last night before I went to bed, I had posted or just shared a little reel of Maya Bialik's breakdown podcast because she has Kai Dickens on, who's the one who made the telepathy tapes. And that's been really impactful to me. And so I was excited about that. So I didn't put any commentary. I just shared the reel about it. And one of my followers on Instagram just wrote, "There's no evidence of a spiritual world, period."
Hmm.
And it was interesting. I looked up to see if I had had any other interaction, and they expressed that they practiced IFS. And so I genuinely felt curious in my system. So I thought, because usually I'll say, well, should I interact with someone? Is it, gonna be beneficial or not? And then I've learned to check with myself. Do I really want to? Am I doing this because I think I should? Or am I doing it because I genuinely want to interact with this person? And I came to the conclusion, actually, I really do. I would love to have a dialogue with this person and understand like how do they define spiritual? Have they had any experiences they can't explain? Or maybe they've had experiences that were really negative around spirituality. And so, I just was really curious about what made this person just write this point blank thing. There's no evidence for spirituality, right? And so I talked to Brian about it, and he's like, "Oh, he's like, just ask, how do you define spiritual? You know, if you want to get into an interesting dialogue." And I thought, "Oh, that sounds good, but I'm going to write that in the way that I would say it." Okay, so this is what I said. I said, "That's so interesting." And I have a defensive part coming up right now that's like, I genuinely thought it was interesting. Um,
Hmm.
I said, "That's so interesting." I said, Do you not experience the self as spiritual? I experience non-material reality every time myself gives unconditional love to my parts, or I receive answers from parts, or I get messages from loved ones who've passed. I don't need anyone else to prove what I experience." And again, there's a part that knowing this person's response that wants to explain that last sentence, the spirit with which I wrote that I don't need anyone else to prove what I experience. What I meant by that was I don't need a scientist or like someone who's done an experiment to prove what I've experienced.
Mhm.
And I was more saying it like securely that's how I function, right? So, though, spoiler alert, I can understand how that would sound defensive, right? Like, I don't need anyone to prove, what I experience. You can't hear tone,
Mm,
right,
mhm.
in text, so people can take it a different way. Okay, so, and I'm gonna read this person's response here. I don't know if we want to edit it out, like the specific of it, but just for your
Yeah,
context.
sure, sure.
So this person said, I think me experience self as spiritual. And they said, I practiced IFS for many years and did find it mystical seeming, but neuroscience shows that what we call self is the brain and can outline why, when neural pathways or parts are unburdened, that the brain or self is the same for everyone. And I have many experiences of a spiritual nature, but believe science and the imaging that explains these experiences. So that was the first one. And I thought, oh, wonderful, right? Like, oh, because you can explain the spiritual, you no longer call it spiritual. Whereas I would say everything spiritual, I think eventually we'll be able to explain. Like there is a reason, right?
Mm,
Like even why people can have telepathy with another person, we can't explain it right now, but it does happen. And I think eventually we will be able to explain it scientifically. So the fact that we can explain the self doesn't diminish it to me, right? So
Mhm.
I'm thinking, oh, actually, we're on the same page here, right? I'm not opposed to science. I'm not opposed to finding the evidence, whether it's quantum physics or whatever. So I'm thinking, oh, cool. This is a good discussion. Um, and then, they say, I'm not trying to invalidate your experience. That you would even suggest that shows a defensive part is at work, and perhaps even a slightly perceived challenge to your worldview is threatening to you. I was like, oh, oh my. And even at this point, I thought, oh, they've just misunderstood me, right? Like they read that last sentence as defensive. And I can see how it might come across as defensive. They're interpreting that I'm saying, I don't need to prove it to you. And that's not actually what I meant. So I was like, oh, okay. But then they went on and said, maybe a part of you agrees with me, causing another part to become defensive to protect you from your uncertainty. I was like, oh, this is so interesting. So then my part started to get activated because I was like, this person is essentially using IFS language
mm,
to attack me or to
mhm.
say, maybe your parts are having this. But then I still had some access to self energy because I thought, let me give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're actually curious. They're actually thinking, oh, I think she's being defensive. Maybe she has these parts. Maybe they're coming from curiosity. But then they went on and said, I was not even expecting a reply from you, as I was simply making a neutral statement. And there is no curiosity or compassion in your response. So I choose not to engage with you any longer to protect my peace. And that's when my Sebastian woke up. And for those of you who don't know, my Sebastian is basically my part who holds anger and self value. And what's fascinating is I didn't have any of my big inner critics come in and be like, yeah, Christine, you did this, you did that, you should have done this. I didn't have any of that. I think because I did know that my response actually was from self. Like I was genuinely feeling curious. And I was genuinely feeling clarity around my own experience and not saying, you have to have my experience. I was trying to invite into a dialogue where I was interested in hearing their point of view. And so I didn't have parts that were berating me at all, but I did. Sebastian came up and was just like, that terrible person, how dare they? I was just, fuming, stomping around, I'm still half asleep, getting out of bed. And just felt so upset. And so I turned toward him and I was like, tell me what you're upset about. And he was saying, I just feel so angry that someone could use IFS to attack, right? And I've had other people use NVC to attack, and it feels like such an injustice because I'm like, oh, these modalities are so wonderful and you're using them in that way. But then I started feeling there were several things that came up. One was as I let Sebastian come up, and then I realized I kind of had a bit of grief because I did want to actually engage with this person. And I had, again, a clarity that I can't, that it's just not gonna work. And so, and then Sebastian was also angry, saying everything that this person accused you of, like they were projecting, they were doing, you know, you were challenging their worldview, and they were getting very defensive and attacking, and all these different things. And then, yeah, it was. Sorry, I'm I'm having a loss of train of thought, but
take your time.
and I do notice it's interesting. I do notice parts that they don't feel activated by the situation, but they're anxious in telling it because I guess it does feel very vulnerable, right? Of like this was an interaction that really activated me. So parts of me feel vulnerable even sharing it. And I'm just noticing that because I've had such parts in the past who, I grew up believing that you should never feel angry. That if you feel angry, you're a bad person, an evil person, a sinner, all of those things. I've said this before, but one of the things my mom always quoted was a scripture that says, anger never achieves the righteousness of God. And so I grew up, I genuinely believed that anger was a bad thing, always and every circumstance, until I was 42.
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely thought that anger is never, ever a good thing. Until I realized that not having access to anger is what kept me in an abusive relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because what anger does, and I love how Larry Rosen, who does the Enemies Project, how he explains that when we have anger, it effectively cuts us off from empathy toward the other person, and that's not a bad thing because what it does is it allows us to protect ourselves and to create distance with the other person. Because if we don't do that, if we continue to have empathy for someone who's harming us, then we're not going to create the distance that we need. So what I realized was, I got up from the bed and I'm brushing my teeth and I'm having this whole existential conversation inside because I felt such anger. And then it made me think, gosh, if I can feel this much anger about this, think about people in Israel and Gaza whose family members have been killed, right?
Mm.
How much anger they have.
Mm-hmm.
And that anger makes sense, right? And someone was telling me that as animals, our first line of defense when we're being harmed is always going to be to run. That's our first line of defense, which is essentially to create distance, right? But if we can't, then we fight.
Mm.
right? And like how people are packed in together and we feel like there's no possibility of creating distance with other people's parts that harm us. So then our angry parts have to fight, right, in order to protect us, and they have to disengage us from our empathy in order to do that. So I went in and I asked my parts, how can we create distance with this person so that you feel safe enough? And they asked me to block them. And this is a big deal because this is only the second person I've ever blocked. I actually blocked one person on Facebook 5 years ago. And this is the second person. But I said, okay, I felt calm and clear about it. I blocked the person. And then my system felt completely safe. And at that point, like creating that distance, I then began to feel even more empathy and compassion for this person. I started to think, wow, they must have had like certain experiences that were really difficult for them. I felt appreciation. Their system's trying to protect them from what they perceive I'm doing to them. And I didn't have like the anger relaxed because I was able to create the distance. So I thought, I don't know, I just had these parts that thought, gosh, I wish that people felt permission or had the ability to create enough distance, from other people's parts so they didn't feel threatened anymore. So anyway, it was like a really big, it felt like a big, what's the word? Evolution, I guess, for my system, because Hallie, you and I were talking about another interaction that I had earlier in the week where my system felt like they were attacking me. And I kept trying to think of responses, but every response was essentially from Sebastian, who felt
Mm.
activated, like
Mhm.
wanting to defend myself. And I would read it to Brian and he would say, oh, that sounds good. And I said, yeah, but I'm aware that it's coming from this really defensive, angry energy. And
Mhm.
so I don't want to respond until I can respond with calm clarity, right?
Mhm.
So in this instance, which was a couple days later, I felt like I had responded from what internally felt like self, right? It felt like calm curiosity. And then I got this response back, which felt like clarity. Oh, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to have the interaction I want with this person. So I need to create distance.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so that was that was the activation this morning.
Wow.
Mm. How is it feeling now for your system?
Well, like I was saying earlier, I feel like my parts are pretty uh settled around the actual situation, but I have
Mhm.
some parts that feel anxious about the vulnerability of sharing it
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
because they think like if I share this, there will be people who will judge
Mm.
this or that
Yeah.
response or just showing the vulnerability, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah. Is there anything they need to feel a bit safer?
Yeah. So myself is telling them what myself normally says myself is saying, even if people do judge your vulnerability or misunderstand you, or reject you because of it, think you're a bad person, all of the things my parts are afraid of, because it could happen. We can't control anyone else. I'll be here for you.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I know the truth. And even in that situation with that person, as I was reading it, like I said, I did feel that security of self.
Mm.
Herself was saying, but we know that your intention wasn't how they heard it. And they're not wrong for hearing it that way. That's their system. And unfortunately, it looks like we're not going to be able to interact.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
But yeah, so my system is feeling more relaxed.
Yeah, it's very like I'm noticing very brave of your parts to share, like in such an open way, and the my system, like mm, when I noticed like Sebastian maybe becoming embodied in you, like there was like a oh, like that's really cool. Like I wonder if we could like be angry, like because I know I have parts of anger, and there's parts that really um, moderate them or make sure that they have to go through self and they have to not shame, and that all makes a lot of sense. But it was just really, yeah, the permission or freeing for my system to see that energy and to see there's a certain word that came to mind was like there's almost like a beauty in anger. Like it's so often like a maligned emotion, like it's there's an adverse reaction to anger that we all have, but there's that sort of righteous anger, really. Oh, look at me! Oh, that part's covered in. Yeah, it's like it feels good. Mm, yeah.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
It reminds me of anger and our inner critics and how Christine, you'll often say they're our biggest allies. You know, it has so much wisdom, our anger or our self agency is more what I equate anger to, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah, self-value,
Self
self-agency.
value. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I often say they're the most loyal parts to us.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They're the
Yeah.
most loyal to us.
Mm, yeah.
And befriending our anger feels similar to befriending our inner critics. Like there's so much value to befriending those parts of us. I also wanted to, if it would be okay to say what came up for me while you were sharing the story or for my parts.
Mhm.
Okay. I was noticing right away, I had a part that said, we wouldn't like to be told what parts we have. Like this person was sort of naming your parts without your permission or consent. And I could imagine that activating some of my parts that would feel defensive or just unsafe. Like this doesn't feel self-led, because curiosity, I mean, I had a part that was like, wow, it's amazing that she was able to continue to feel curious, because I had a part that was like, if this person were curious, maybe they would have presented it more like, I'm curious. I'm noticing that I think I might be hearing parts of you like this. Tell me where I'm
Tell me
wrong,
where
which
I'm wrong, yeah.
maybe they don't have that language, but um, yeah, and it so resonated with the projecting.
Mm-hmm.
Also, is this person saying that they don't really like IFS anymore, but yet they're using IFS to have this conversation? Like there's just this disconnect that was really confusing to my system.
Mhm.
And definitely David and I were talking about this before we hit record, an energy of wanting to protect your parts feeling defensive on your behalf, or just not wanting anyone to misunderstand you, um,
Mm,
or feeling uncomfortable with that,
yeah.
with any judgment toward you.
I was saying to Hallie, I have what I call a big brother part that sort of
Mhm.
came online with my sister, and then I noticed that one with you two, especially. It's just like, what are you saying? That sort of, how dare you? Yeah. That sort of vibe. Mm. Yeah,
Aw.
protective. Mm.
Yeah, and my system appreciates that, feels loved by that, you know? I know sometimes when I'll share something with you, Hallie, you'll say, "Oh, I have parts that are just coming up wanting to protect you and so upset for you," you know? And that often feels good to my system, like, and it's funny because Brian he'll always say, oh, he calls my Sebastian part Sebs. And he's like, oh, I love Sebs. He's like, because he values you and I value you. And so I think both of you know that Sebs was exiled in my system until I was 42. And I had no access to him. And then I was doing IFS work with my Cassandra, who was my most dominant front facing part, that was like, I have to please every person in front of me no matter what. And he came in to counterbalance her essentially. And so there's often kind of a polarization or, interaction between Cassandra and him. And so Brian knows like when Cassandra's coming in, and then when Sebs comes in, Brian's like, yes. And he'll usually kind of side with Sebastian, and Cassandra's like, yeah, you don't understand me, but it's really hard, right? For a partner or a friend to be like, okay, no. And Brian will say, no, I love all your parts.
So sweet.
Just real quick, also, this reminds me that yesterday, Brian was saying, I trust you to tell me the truth. And I said, I appreciate that, but you can't trust Cassandra. She won't tell you the truth.
That's so funny. And oh my gosh.
Was that Sebastian saying that, or is it a different part?
Yeah, I think it
Good
was.
question.
It was Sebastian and almost like a chorus of other parts that were like, but you understand that you can't trust Cassandra, right? She'll tell you whatever she thinks you want to know. And so it's interesting because it's actually a positive development in my system that I have access to anger. And I really understand other people's systems who are saying, no, anger's dangerous, right? Because that's true too. If we blend with those parts and we act as them, there's often big consequence to that. But it's not an either or of like blending and acting as them or completely suppressing them and pleasing. It's allowing it to come up, turning toward it, and asking what it needs. But yeah, so my Sebastian said, I appreciate that this person said, I don't want any more contact. But then then Sebastian said, but it's so convenient that they got to say all of their piece, and then now you can't say yours, kind of thing. It was like, isn't that nice for them? That kind of attitude. But yeah, I really like also, David, how you said, like having permission to embody that, to feel like there is a self-valuing, a protection, like what is happening that you feel like is dangerous or unjust, just allowing it. Yeah.
Yeah, because in my system especially, like yours, anger was very much exiled by religious belief and many other things, and that word acceptance, like just accepting, it's a perfectly normal, natural, valid human emotion. It's no different than anxiety or sadness, or it's got its place, and it's like, yeah, like just having that permission, that liberation. And sometimes it's come to mind now with my parts of anger. I deal with them is, you can say whatever you want to me. Like, you can talk, you can say anything you want to me. It's all okay. It's all okay. But if we're gonna, maybe talk to another person, let me just, get to the basic points, get to the needs. Just not edit you, but not dilute you, but just, and there's just sort of knowing that when I do that, they want more. It's like parts are not pardon me, parts are not stupid. They can really sense whenever something
Yeah.
works and something doesn't, and it's not like a sort of a bypassy thing or something where they're not agreeing. They can see the utility when self-compassion and a part's anger sort of comes together. And yeah,
Yeah.
because like you say, when angry parts blend and they say their thing, it might feel good in the moment, but they don't get what they want and the relationship will suffer.
Right. Yeah. That reminds me of something I was telling Brian about yesterday about my Cassandra. As I mean, it's been years of unburdening so much, but she finally understands and sees clearly that pleasing another person while feeling resentful and overriding my own needs is not kind to the other person. When I turn it around and I think, would I want someone to just do whatever I wanted but hold resentment in their heart toward me? I'm like, oh no, that's like the worst thing. I never want anyone to do that, right? I want them to be honest about their needs and that expressing that and letting the anger tell you, right, when their unmet needs, so that then the self can speak for them and advocate for them, is the kindest thing we can do to set up a relationship to be sustainable and to be loving, and for both people to be loved simultaneously. And yet, unfortunately, the grief is that sometimes another person's system isn't capable of honoring or valuing our needs. And so then distance is our only option, I think. That's what becomes difficult. I was even thinking with this person, I thought, okay, what if I couldn't create distance? Is there any other alternative, And if my part said, well, if I had someone like Marshall Rosenberg or Larry Rosen, like a mediator in the middle who was going to ensure that we both stayed rational, is what this part said, you know, um, and that we were both owning our parts, and taking responsibility. If there was an assurance of a mediator there, then maybe we would be able to have dialogue. But I don't know. Then I have another skeptical part that's like, that's just not possible for everybody to
Mm.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if the say the person you were talking to on Instagram, if are they misguided maybe in how they're using parts language, or is there a part of them that is using IFS to reach a particular goal that makes sense for them, but it's sort of not in good faith, say? And maybe in my system, and there's that lack of good faith, it sort of feels like a deeper knowing, or just like an aversion response, maybe, of like something isn't right here. And
Mhm.
it's really hard to have a strategy or a clear path with that. I suppose it's just like one of those intuition things. It depends. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when there's no foundation. You
Mm.
don't know this person.
Mm.
You don't know there's care there, there's love, there's trust. It's like, am I defending my identity? Like that they don't even know who I am. Well, they're almost questioning who you were. Or I can imagine that would make it feel in some ways safer because there's like a detachment, like, oh, well, this isn't that important to me, this person, this relationship, but
Mm.
also maybe scarier in a way.
Mhm. Yeah. That reminds me of something also that Larry Rosen talks about in the Enemies Project, where he explains that it's not a bad thing. It's a natural, normal human thing to, when we feel threatened, right, to um, shut down our empathy so that we can create distance and boundary with someone who's harming or we perceive as harming us, right? Which I understood in that moment. That's also what this person is doing. Their system perceives me as a threat. And so they're fighting essentially and then trying to put this boundary. And so I respect that, in some level. I understand because I'm experiencing the same thing. So I understand that. But what Larry Rosen in the Enemies Project is trying to do is create, he says that the solution is that the two people feel safe enough. So kind of like you were saying, Hallie, like if you don't know anything about this person, their context, their life, you can't possibly feel safe with them. So that's his whole goal, is to help people connect on a more personal level. And he'll tell them, I don't want you to talk about the thing you disagree on at all. I just want you to tell each other about your life, about what makes you come alive and what your biggest hardships have been, and, those kinds of things, because other people can relate to them, and then they start to be able to feel safe with you because they connect to the same human needs, right? And that's what was fascinating to me was, and I know, in the past I would have parts that would judge me for blocking this person, but that was the distance I needed from which I could then say, oh, yeah, of course this person's system makes sense. They're not an evil, terrible person. They just had protective parts that felt threatened and came up to protect them. I was trying to make a bid for let me try to understand you and you understand me. And when that didn't work, I was like, oh, okay, I think distance is the option.
I got really curious when you talked about how after you blocked them, all of a sudden you had more access to self energy. There was just this ability to feel compassion and maybe empathy for them. What I noticed in my system was, oh, yeah, that makes sense because, and this might not be why it was for you, but if I knew that that person couldn't just come out of nowhere again, there's not the threat of them coming in and activating my system at any time. All of a sudden, that distance is essentially like forced. That threat is gone, or at least that actually acute threat is gone. And maybe that would create some spaciousness.
Yeah, that reminds me of something. I don't know if you've heard Glennon Doyle talk about how people always wonder if your husband cheated on you all those times and like harmed you that much, how can you be friends and have good relationship now? And she said, I couldn't feel safe with him while I was in a marriage with him. But as soon as I left and he could no longer essentially hurt me in that way anymore, then I could feel safe with him because I had created the boundary needed to protect myself. So it's a similar kind of concept, right? It's like I'm creating a situation in which I cannot be harmed by this person anymore. And from that space, I can have compassion and connection, maybe, I guess it's hard to have connection if you're blocked, but
Well, maybe in a spiritual realm.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying there.
High five, Sebastian. I don't know if that would be for David's like snarky parts. Any of our snarky parts. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were you saying, David?
I was gonna sort of maybe just point us towards maybe the little exiles that may be beneath these parts when someone comes in our life and activates anger or anxiety, or we say, and maybe those parts of anger protect the whole system on some level, but also maybe our most sensitive, vulnerable parts as well. And yeah, I suppose I just wanted to call to mind, because something that I've noticed is whenever I notice anger or anxiety, and there's self really does touch and meet those exiles, and is really with them and hears them out. I have the same experience that you had, Christine, of the anger drops afterwards, and there's much less energy, much less anxiety. And it's you can get lost sometimes. I know I get lost so often, and parts get lost in the conflict. But sometimes it helps me to remember that beneath that is maybe there's parts that are hurting or upset, by what's happening.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting because the person, in some ways, I was trying to give them the benefit of the doubt that they were getting curious. I think they genuinely thought I was feeling defensive,
Mhm.
so they were trying to get curious, like, what's underneath that? Are they there parts that feel uncertain or, whatever is going on under there? But that wasn't true, and that's why I was kind of, like, still in self, like, calm and, "Oh, no, they're N if if they said, "Tell me where I'm wrong," I would say, "Oh, no, you're wrong." Like, that's and I had clarity about that. "Oh, no, that's not actually what's happening, but I see how you might interpret it that way." So then, yeah, when Sebastian came up was really when this is fascinating. Yeah, when the person said, "You had no curiosity or compassion in your response."
Mhm.
Sebastian was like, "What the heck are you saying?" Like, that is so untrue. How dare you, right?
Mhm.
And I think that I think what he's protecting, what I'm noticing is young parts who often felt very misunderstood.
Mm,
And, like, my intentions were not understood, and I
mm,
had to explain, and especially when someone asserted that I meant something that I knew I didn't mean,
mm,
you know? So I think it's those are the parts that he was protecting.
mm.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm noticing actually, like, tears in my eyes for some reason, I don't know why.
Oh.
I think maybe one of my parts, resonates with that misunderstood word, yeah.
Mhm. Big time.
Yeah.
Me too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. The empathy.
As we've been talking about anger, I was thinking about how what helps my Sebastian Cassandra parts, right? My self-worth or value and my people-pleasing parts feel okay, or like there's a safe next step is being able to speak for my parts. So being able to just note to somebody else, I'm noticing a part of me feeling angry right now, right? Or I'm noticing a part of me wanting to say what you want to hear right now, right? And being able to say that feels okay to both those sides until we actually have sort of a consensus within the system.
It's like what you were saying earlier about, like, just the awareness is huge. We might not have listened to all the parts yet, but just being aware of them helps the parts feel safe, and for me, when other people are aware of their own parts, it helps me feel safe.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yes, and I'm calling her Cassandra, my own people pleaser, sorry, Cassandra's buddy.
You can ask her her
Um,
name, yeah.
I know. She
You don't
yeah,
have to now, but yeah.
yeah. My people-pleasing part feels it's people-pleasing enough, if you will, to share for my parts. As long as I'm
Mm,
sharing for them, she says, "That's okay."
Mm,
Now that I know how to do that, and
mhm,
we've experimented with that, and she's seen that that tends to go better, um, for my system, depending on the person too, right? Depending on the
yeah.
level of connection and safety that's already there or not there. Um,
So that's a
s
compromise that those 2
Mhm.
parts are good with.
Mhm, yeah, because the self-agency part feels heard in that, feels like it gets to be acknowledged. So, for example, I had a client yesterday who received a text message from someone and had parts come online that were like, "You need to respond, you need to respond." But she didn't have consensus within her system around what she wanted to say, And what I feel like is the lowest common denominator, but I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but like, what do all the parts feel at least okay about as a place to let it rest? I sensed in her, at least, she had a part that wanted to at least say something. The pressure of not responding and the shame of not responding was so strong. And so we checked in and it was like, well, what if you just say the truth, which is, got your message. I'm acknowledging it. I really have a part that wants to acknowledge it and a part that really wants to get back to you. And I am still sitting with, what do I want to say? Right. And what if you just said that? Like, because that's your truth in this moment. Like, and even saying, and a part of me is judging me for taking time to respond to you. And so anyway, that's just something I've done a lot in the last year or so when I'm spinning around. What am I going to say? What am I going to say? And it's like, well, what's true right now? Right now, I want to respond. I don't know what to say. So can I say that? Right?
Right.
Like, can I
Right.
thank them for the message and appreciate that and acknowledge that it matters to me? Would that help my people pleasing part, right? And then also acknowledge that I'm not just going to give in and say something nice and not be authentic. The lowest common denominator, I don't
love
know
it.
why that's the wording
Yeah.
that comes.
Good word.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. Like that one place where your parts can be like, yeah, all right, you know, everyone's happy. Yeah.
Like we're not ultimately happy, but we're okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Especially the more time that goes by, I have parts that could imagine what they're projecting onto it, their parts. And so I have a part that just doesn't also ever want to leave someone hanging because this part doesn't like to be left hanging. And so it is still kind to offer the truth for myself in that moment. At least that's what my system feels. It feels self-led, even if there is no next bigger step or next bigger statement. It's just the truth for that moment.
It feels really self-led to me. And you listen to all your parts and you reached an agreement. Like that's, to me, that's self-leadership.
Yeah. And what's coming up for me is, and we kind of talked about this when we were saying, can it be self-led to ghost someone, right? Or like to not respond? And Brian and I were talking about this, about how what is self-led for an individual can look different for each person because we are aware of our own parts and kind of what's going on for them, what that lowest common denominator is. And like you said, Hallie, it can depend on the relationship, the type of relationship we have with the person.
Greatly.
Because like I was telling you, I had someone DM me that I don't know, and they don't tell me their name or anything. They just want to interact with me and get advice on things. And kind of the same thing, lashed out at me and got upset with me because I set a boundary or didn't give them what they wanted, I guess. And so in that moment, I had this tug of war between Cassandra and Sebastian. And Cassandra was like so strong. They were both so strong. She really wanted to send a response that was very fawning and placating and I'm so sorry kind of thing. And Sebastian really wanted to send a response that was defensive and let me tell you how it is, kind of thing. And they were so polarized that it felt like, at least in that moment, myself was aware of them, but I couldn't access enough self energy to feel calm or neutral or have clarity about what to say. It was either going to be Cassandra or Sebastian that answered. And so in that moment, not saying I'm going to ghost that, and I didn't ghost that person, I eventually, after a couple days, found enough self energy to respond. But in that moment, the self-led thing for my system was to not respond because I didn't have enough, like you said, safety and connection with that person, I think, to even be vulnerable enough to speak for my parts. Like it didn't feel
Totally.
appropriate to say,
Yeah.
I have a part that really wants to say sorry and placate you, and I have another part that's really mad at you. Like, I don't know if that person
Totally.
could have handled it. So even though I was aware of it, It felt like silence is, and I would have had a part in the past too that would have shamed me and said, "No, you have to say something." And I kind of had that part too, but I was kind of like, but right now it's either going to be this or this.
Mm. Yeah, but your common denominator was silence?
Yeah.
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 And it makes so much sense because it's almost like a spectrum. I mean, my system will sort of do this scan. How important is this person to me?
Yeah.
How important is this relationship to me? You know, then it's so valuable to my system if it's an important relationship. And at this point in my life, it means those people are people who welcome my parts truly. Like, I don't feel
Mhm.
like I have most if I don't feel like we have the relationship where we give each other grace and benefit of the doubt and just like
Good
like a
faith.
true
Yeah.
like care and love for each other, a come as you are sort of relationship, then it's yeah, I think like you and I talked about that day or that during that time, Christine, it was the most self-led decision to not respond because the energy it takes to even sit with your parts and get to that sort of like,
Mhm.
okay, what could we say that you all feel heard for now? That's a lot of energy. And I know my system doesn't want to do that for people that I don't have a relationship with or don't feel safe with.
Right. And it felt like myself was saying, "Oh, there's no urgency. It's okay. We don't have to do anything right now. Like
Yeah.
we'll I'll listen to you and I'll make an appointment and listen to you and then see if something comes." And it would the thing that I ended up saying was I
I'm
asked
so
Brian,
curious.
I was like, "Brian, what would you say?" He's like, "Oh, I would say," I can't remember exactly what it was, but he said, "Oh, I would say this." And my parts were like, "Yeah, that sounds good. We feel no charge with that. That seems truthful and not defensive and kind to the other person." Oh, I remember. It was something like, oh, they were upset that ads were playing during a meditation that I had put out on YouTube. And the reason why my parts felt so defensive was that I have tried and tried so many things to try to figure out how to take them off. And I thought I had, and somehow they hadn't. So again, my parts felt like misunderstood as far as my
Mm.
intention. And, they were telling me that it really disrupted them and I really needed to, this kind of thing. So, um, so Brian said, "Well, you could just say, yeah, that makes sense. That would feel really disrupting. Um, my best solution or my best suggestion would be to get YouTube Premium, so you don't ever have to worry about ads."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
okay."
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
And
I
if that
love
person
that.
takes that as I didn't in that moment, I wasn't being aggressive in it. It was genuine. So
Yeah.
Well, you sat with it long enough where you were able to validate them. Yeah, that makes sense. And my hunch is because you validated yourself, you had time to validate your own
right,
parts. And so they were no longer holding their swords trying to defend
Mhm.
you. They were just like, yeah, we're good. We're with
yeah,
our mom or our
yeah.
yeah, our
And
leader. Just
asking,
kidding.
because Brian's like detached from all of the inner stuff, so he's able to kind of just say something without angst that seems rational and reasonable. So I'll often ask him, "What would you say?" And it's funny with the one we were talking about before. He initially said, "I think the best thing is just to ask, how would you define spirituality?" And that's it. And I went back after, I was like, "Why didn't I just write that?" But it was a wonderful learning experience. So it reminds me of when someone's an atheist and I get curious and I say, "Oh, what's your definition of God that you reject?"
Mm.
And they'll explain, this religiously informed version of this judge or different things. And I'll say, "Oh, yeah, I don't believe in that either. Like my definition of God is just an energy of love, unconditional love, And they're like, "Oh, well, I believe in that." I'm like, "Oh, okay, we actually agree." You know? That's why when she first started off saying, you know, self can be explained via science, I was like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. Like, we're on the same page."
Thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah.
Thanks for
There's
being in it
so
with
much
me.
there. Yeah.
And I don't have any anger at all toward them now. And yet, the anger that I did have was protective of me and helped me learn so much. So I'm actually really grateful for the interaction, and have no ill will at all toward that person. So
Yeah. Yeah. Sending some self energy to that person from me as well. 'Cause
if you're
You make
watching, thank
you
you.
make sense, and thank you for inspiring a lovely
Yeah.
podcast episode
May we all be kind to ourselves.
and all of our parts.
Until we meet again.
Until we meet again.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Self-led besties talking about our parts. Self-led besties speaking from our hearts. Self-led besties, you can't get it wrong. Self-led besties, your parts can get along. 'Cause what blocks the way is the way. So listen to what your parts have to say. Self-led besties, doing the best we can. Self-led besties, come over, we'll lend a hand.
And please don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, besties.